Welcome to episode 17 of the Cancer Pod. In the next 3 episodes, we're going to the movies. Today, we're reviewing What the Health, which came out in 2017.
I'm Dr. Tina Kaiser, and as Leah likes to say, I'm the sciencey one.
And I'm Dr. Leah Sherman, and I'm the Cancer Insider.
And we're 2 naturopathic doctors who do integrative cancer care.
But we're not your doctors.
This is for education, entertainment, and informational purposes only.
Do not apply any of this information without first speaking to your doctor.
The views and opinions expressed on this podcast by the hosts and their guests are solely their own.
Welcome to the Cancer Pod. Rolling.
Right on the set. Rolling.
Rolling and action. Okay, Tina.
Yeah.
It's a brand new year,
Mm-hmm.
and we're trying out a new format for this pod.
I like it. I'm excited about this.
It's fun. We're going to be watching movies and talking to you about movies.
Yeah, and we're hoping to engage you. Either you've already seen it or you can watch it before we talk about it.
Yeah, this should be good. So what we're doing for this first pod of the new year is we're going to talk about movies that actually we've had patients mention to us.
Mm-hmm.
And some of them, or one of them I'd already seen before. And we're just going to kind of talk about what's good and what's bad, you know, what we agree with, what we don't. And it's the Cancer Pod at the movies.
Okay, so our first movie to discuss and critique is What the Health.
So that movie, I definitely had patients who I would talk to, the dietitian would talk to about making diet and lifestyle changes. And it wasn't until they watched this movie that they kind of came to, you know, the realization that certain dietary changes might be helpful. And so I was really curious and I was like, I want to watch this movie. And I was really surprised at the film.
Okay, I'm going to admit to something. I don't watch any of these health documentaries because it makes me squirm in my seat usually. And so over the years, and there's been some really popular ones, I don't watch them, but I am doing it for our podcast. And I squirmed in my seat with this one.
Yeah. So I find that a lot of these, they tend to be very like agenda and propaganda-y.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, I mean, like, well, you know my thoughts on this film. What we should say is, what was it, the Netflix description of the movie?
Okay, so the movie is found on Netflix, so it's free. You can watch it at your leisure, but
well, it's free if you subscribe to Netflix.
Oh, right. There is an assumption there. Correct. All right. So they say this film examines the link between diet and disease and the billions of dollars at stake in the healthcare, pharmaceutical, and food industries.
Okay. So it's intriguing, right? Like you're like, oh, well, that sounds very intriguing. Mm-hmm. What the film is about is veganism.
Yes. Ultimately, it's about veganism. Or can I say this? Ultimately, it presents the case of why to become a vegan.
Right.
Okay. So we're agreed there.
Yes. Of why they think you should become a vegan.
Right. So they have a message and then they build a film around their messaging.
Right.
Okay.
Yes. So for anyone out there who's curious, veganism started, it was a movement that there are cultures, there's societies, you know, that are based on not eating animal flesh for cultural and religious reasons.
But they would eat the products of the animals, like maybe milk or cheese or yogurt.
Eggs. Yeah.
Eggs.
Exactly.
But not the flesh of the animal.
Right.
And that's what vegetarianism was considered, not eating the flesh. Veganism is nothing of the animal.
Correct. Not wearing the leather, not even like having honey.
Right.
Even though bees aren't necessarily, I mean, they're making the honey anyways. The same way like a chicken is going to make an egg, whether or not you eat it. And so it came out though more as like an animal welfare issue.
For sure. Yes. Veganism arose from animal welfare. Yes. Not from health or any kind of health movement at that time.
Right. Okay. So that's kind of where we're going to start. And
although it did dovetail nicely with the whole idea of protein being bad for you. So I guess it was adopted by the health people, but it wasn't introduced for health purposes. It was introduced as veganism for animal welfare.
I like that. It was adopted as part of a health movement. So I guess let's just start with like the parts that we would agree with. these are our opinions,
Hmm.
the good and the bad.
Yeah. So right out of the gates, I think there can be healthy vegans in the world. So just so we're clear, I don't say to people you must become vegan to be healthy, but I will say you can be healthy as a vegan. So if people choose to do that for animal welfare reasons or, whatever the reason is, it's fine to do as long as they're responsible vegans.
And as long as they are eating healthfully, because I've also
Right.
seen, and I was an unhealthy vegetarian when I was a vegetarian when I was in art school.
Hmm.
I am an omnivore.
Hmm.
I'm plant-based omnivore, so I'm majority plants. But I've seen vegans who don't eat plants.
Yes, that's not going to work over time.
Right. So I mean, we could do a whole episode on this, but it is very complicated. But a plant-based vegan diet that's well balanced, totally fine.
Yes, it's the presence of the plants, not the lack of the meat that makes it healthy.
Exactly. And I think, okay, so that'll lead us to the next part of our review.
Yeah.
But what we're going to do is we're going to start with the part that we actually kind of agree with.
There was a few points I agreed with.
Yeah.
One of the big ones is, and I think they did a good job at this, I wish it wasn't at the end of the whole documentary. I have a hard time calling it a documentary because it's more of a docudrama.
Oh my gosh, I was just going to say that.
Yeah, because it's just a little bit over the top and selective, and it's not really. Anyways, call it what you want.
We're starting with the good part, Tina.
Oh yeah, right. Back to the positive. No, I agree that the messaging from nonprofits, whether it's the American Cancer Society or the American Diabetes Association or Susan G. Komen, I mean, these hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue type places that have links to corporate America that include both pharmaceutical companies and large industrial agriculture companies. Yeah, that's not the best place to get your information. I agree with that. And I agree that they will temper some of the science because they're getting enough dollars to not speak on a topic or to, at least muffle themselves because they don't want to endanger their donors and endanger the incoming revenue.
Right. It's like how you don't want like big corporate money involved in politics because it's going to influence policy. So, I mean, it's very much that sort of thing. And that kind of also plays into, they brought up checkoffs, government checkoffs.
Now, this was interesting to me because I didn't know this part. I didn't know that there were direct lines. I mean, I knew big industry was influencing the messaging, but I didn't know how much the government, our government in the United States anyways, is directly influencing the messaging that was going out there. This is all news to me.
Yeah. So the checkoff programs started like in the 1930s, and it's to help with farmers, agriculture by researching and promoting specific commodities. So there are checkoff programs for things like beef, dairy, soy, cotton, like really like common types of.
Yeah. And what is a checkoff program? Like, what does that entail? What's the net effect?
So, well, what they do is they take a percentage, like $1 per head of cattle or whatever, they'll take a certain percentage of whatever is being produced. Mm-hmm. That money goes to the government to help to promote that product, whether it's through some, doing additional research on the product or by actually coming out with an advertising campaign like Got Milk or Cotton, the fabric of our lives.
So all of that was from money that was pooled at the USDA or somewhere in our higher ups in our government from the farmers themselves to turn around and do basically PR with the dollar.
Yes. Yeah.
And tell us on the receiving end that milk does a body good.
Right. It's not only those big products, like beef and dairy and eggs. It's also things like lamb and honey. So, there was a campaign for lamb, I don't know how many years ago. So that, I mean, that's like really interesting. What's being promoted, and like their claim that stuffed crust pizza was part of the dairy checkoff. Like if that in fact is true, like that's pretty shocking.
Right. It would be very subtle messaging that has nothing to do with actual science, but they are
it's more to promote the and I don't see that as a bad thing entirely. Like I don't think it's bad to promote these products. I just think that in that way of just making like these blanket flashy advertising campaigns where it's not necessarily health first.
Well, I think it's bad because it's whipsawing people's opinion. Like, are eggs good or are eggs bad? Is margarine good or is margarine bad? I mean, we've gone through these different renditions of what those messages are, and come to find out that's probably more dollar driven than science driven the entire time, but nobody knows that.
Right. And I didn't look to see like what percentage of it was going towards research, and what was going towards advertising. So that would be a good thing for me to look up. But yeah, so definitely like that would be something that I thought was good to kind of put out there. So people know that if you see an ad on TV about why you should be using a product without it naming a specific product.
Right. Like the almond commercials are out now, or pistachios are out.
Exactly. Then that's most likely where it's coming from. And it'll say on the bottom who it's paid by, the Pistachio Association of America or whatever.
Yeah. Which is fine again, but don't confuse advertising or publicity with science. Right. So that's not where you should get your nutrition information ultimately anyway.
From a commercial. Yeah. Not from a commercial.
I mean, we all fall prey to it because, we all have those things in our heads now, right? The other white meat.
Right. I mean, the Got Milk one was huge. People have it on T-shirts.
Yeah. Milk it does a body good. That one was catchy.
Yeah. No, they're really good.
The other part that I thought was interesting and scientifically kind of just, like, wait a second, is that true? Because I think a lot of viewers probably caught it and thought, was how Dr. Milton Mills talked about how plants are the ones that make proteins. And yeah, he's kind of oversimplifying, but it is a truism. I mean, nitrogen from our atmosphere, because our atmosphere is mostly nitrogen, is fixed and taken up by the roots or rhizomes of a plant, and then it gets integrated in with carbon and becomes an amino acid in the plant. So amino acids, the building block of proteins, are built by plants, manufactured by plants, just like plants make, cellulose and carbohydrates and things like that. They also make amino acids. And then it's true. I mean, whether you're eating a cow or any other ruminant, they're getting it from the plant. They're getting all their amino acids and their protein from the plant. They just reassemble it into muscle or milk or whatever. So I thought that was neat. I mean, in a geeky kind of way, like, he's got a good point there.
No, but it is true, right? I mean, that's why you want your animal products to eat healthy as well.
Their native diet, right.
Their native diets. Yeah. So I think this is a really good time for us to take a fast break, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about what maybe we did not agree with.
Sounds good. See you on the other side.
Okay, we're back. We're back and we're talking about What the Health, which is a movie that is about veganism. Mm-hmm. I mean, it definitely has an agenda to convince the viewer that veganism is the only way to go.
Yes, that's it. So let's talk about what we found not so likable. I'm going to put it downright offensive. I really disliked the gore. I wouldn't even call it gore. I'd call it blatant animal cruelty, and I don't know. I don't like it. I don't like cruelty in general because I don't watch it on a screen. I don't watch blood on a screen. I don't like watching people suffer, but watching animals in such a blatant...
It's such a visceral response. And I must say, they do say in the opening, when the little rating comes up in the upper left corner on Netflix, it does say gore, and I think smoking was the other one. It does not say animal cruelty.
Right.
Serving cigarettes to children in a frying pan. But we'll get to that. Yeah. So it says gore. And I think it says gore because gore's kind of titillating, right? I mean, people like gory movies. They like that kind of thing,
I guess.
But this is like, it really evokes this visceral response to where like, you're like, I really don't want to watch this.
Yeah, I will warn people before they go watch this. There's some visuals in there that you can't get out of your head after you see it. I had to look away.
And a lot of these types of movies do that. And it is true. There are practices in industrial farming that just they're not ethical in any way. And yes, those should be changed. But yeah, I don't think that little like gore in the upper left-hand corner was enough.
Warning. I agree. Yeah, because I want to remove some of the images that are now in my head because I don't eat animals. So, I get it. I don't eat them.
But you're a vegetarian.
I'm a vegetarian.
But you're like lacto-ovo.
Yeah, and I will eat fish. So,
right.
So I'm really a pescatarian.
Pesco-lacto-ovo.
Pesco-lacto-ovo, if we must be super correct. Basically, I don't eat things with feet.
Good thing those fish, they evolved out of that.
That's right.
Okay, so that's really interesting. So you are a vegetarian, and part of it is because of the unethical practices.
Oh yeah, part of it's because I already know what's going on in large industrial places where they're processing chickens and pigs and such. And so there's, yes, for sure, part of it is animal welfare on a larger scale. But even if I could have a well raised, grass fed, locally grown, my neighbor kills their cattle, I don't really like it that much. So
So even before you were a vegetarian, you never really liked meat.
correct. My dad used to
Okay.
say I'm a cheap date because basically I always just ordered pasta.
Okay. Okay. And I, on the other hand, have always loved meat, especially when I was a vegetarian. I used to have dreams about eating fried chicken. And I think it was just because I was a horrible vegetarian, mostly a breaditarian. But
Long before you were a naturopath, just for the record.
oh yeah, no, this
Yeah.
was like when I was like 18 and in art school. And before I realized that gluten doesn't like me.
Mm-hmm.
So, anyways, but yes. So, and I love animals. My dream is to have land with animals,
Well, and by the time we get to the point in the movie where they are showing animal cruelty and they do it over and over, and it's way overdone in my opinion. I mean, it's not just like a shot once to make their point in context. It goes along with the tactic of the entire movie that is basically to move you to the point where your emotions have now shut off your brain.
Right.
It's part of the whole plan.
Right. There are like musical, like swellings. I mean, the whole movie is very manipulative.
Yes.
And it's really obvious to us, I would say. Let's say it's obvious to us because it worked, right? I mean, it moved some of my patients to actually adopt a plant-based diet. Mm-hmm. Did they become totally vegan? I think one of them did initially and then was like, oh, no, I need to do this in moderation. And so they were more plant-based. Uh-huh. But it does open people's eyes, but it's like hitting someone over the head with a frying pan.
Yeah. And just from the very opening, it basically presents a problem and implies a conspiracy and kind of goes from there. It kind of sets the tone and juxtaposes some footage that is very inflammatory. Let's talk about the oversimplifications.
Okay, so they have experts, right? They have these experts that are these doctors that this isn't their only movie, right? Like you can find these doctors listed on IMDb, which is that movie database. And so like one of the doctors, like it actually, when I Googled him, the first thing that came up was like his name and then it said film actor. Mm-hmm. And he's a chiropractor and he owns a clinic that is a very well-known clinic. But they start talking about the science of it and they, like you said, they oversimplify it and they leave out a lot of information that also applies to what they're talking about.
Yes. Because veganism is their agenda, they're going to go on and on about what animal flesh does and animal products, not just flesh. Eggs were demonized in this movie. Mm-hmm. Milk was completely tried to make you cringe.
Oh God.
Right?
Like that, yes. That comparison, like what's in your milk. And I'm not a milk drinker. I've always kind of found milk gross just because I grew up in a country where it wasn't pasteurized. It was served warm. It was thick. You got a little cube of sugar next to it. Like,
because it was so unpalatable.
To an American kid's palate, yes.
Okay.
It was not. I'm sure for people who grew up on a farm, it is the best thing in the world that they've tasted. But so what they're demonizing saturated fat.
Yes. Mm-hmm. In every form.
And so like they go after
cholesterol.
And cholesterol. So they go after eggs. And eggs, yes, they do have cholesterol. They have other nutrients as well. And they have 1.5 grams of saturated fat. So that really isn't a lot in the big picture. But they don't care. Like to them, saturated fat is the cause of all of the health evils in the world.
Yes, everything. And I think that's been disproven in the actual medical literature.
And I mean, it is a player.
Yes.
It's a player. But when they fail to mention trans fats.
Yes.
Which there's no question that trans fats, which is found in like processed foods. So like packaged pastries and, it's those hydrogenated fats.
Yes. As soon as the word hydrogenated appears before anything, it's a trans fat. So hydrogenated palm oil, hydrogenated peanut oil, hydrogenated soybean oil, what doesn't matter. If it says that, then it's been altered to be a trans fat, which for the most part Trans fats do not occur in nature. They're man-made.
So that, to me, the fact that they never mention the role of trans fats, they never mention the role of refined sugars. They talk about carbohydrates all the time, and they never specify between a simple and a complex carbohydrate.
That's huge. Because we know.
So huge.
Yeah. One, carbohydrates, there's only 3 macronutrients. Carbohydrates is one of 3. So you have carbohydrates, fats, and proteins. You need some carbohydrates. They're the good ones that are in the vegetables, but they never differentiate between that and simple sugar.
Right. And so that is very problematic.
Remember they had that scene where they talked about the 1940s and this weird diet that was introduced and
the rice and fruit diet. Yeah.
Yeah, and they actually showed table sugar as more nutritious than anything from an animal.
Yeah, no, I mean...
Just for the record, that's an untruth. Like, that's a blatant untruth. Right. There's nothing in table sugar that's going to be more sustainable for your health than what you're going to find in a piece of meat. And again, this is coming from someone who's a vegetarian. It's not that I think you need meat to survive, certainly, but that's an untruth.
Yeah. I think the other thing that we both found incredibly amusing was when the doctor was talking about how you could get all the protein you need from eating vegetables. And they show a slide of a bowl of brown rice and a bowl of broccoli.
With a plus sign between them.
With a plus sign between them. So over the rice, it says 50 grams, meaning protein. And over the broccoli, it says 30 grams of protein. And so together that gets you 80 grams of protein. And it's supposed to be like a 2,000 calorie a day diet.
Okay.
So if you just quickly do the math, in order to get 50 grams of protein from brown rice alone, you have to eat 10 cups of brown rice.
That's a lot of rice.
In a day. It's a lot of rice. And as anyone who's studied nutrition knows, that's not a complete protein.
Right.
It needs to be paired with like a bean or, legumes.
In all fairness, they say that that's a bunch of bunk, the complete protein idea.
And that part I missed. Because
Yeah.
I think I was busy raging about something else.
Yeah. They say that's not true. It is true in that this is why traditional cultures will often put rice and beans together, because the essential amino acids that are found in each one of those, we only have so many essential amino acids. And so there are a number of essential amino acids in the rice and the bean put together, you get all 8 essential amino acids.
You don't have to have them in the same meal.
No,
but you have to have them in your diet. So by them showing the broccoli, so for broccoli, you need 10 cups of broccoli to get to 30 grams of protein, because each cup of broccoli is about 3 grams of protein. So for anyone who says, oh, you can get as much protein from broccoli as you can from a serving of meat, sure you can, but can you really in one sitting? Like, can you really eat that much broccoli and rice? So basically you have to have 20 cups of food if you were to do this. And that just doesn't seem,
Well, and I will say this, if you are a good vegan, the volume of food you need to eat in a day is a larger volume of food than an omnivore has to eat to get all the nutrients in, because the plants take up more space and have less protein. So, like your salad bowl isn't a small bowl, it should be a large bowl with nuts and seeds on it. And the actual volume of food is larger, which sounds good. Most of us like to eat. So it should be a blessing, right? Like, oh, I get to eat more.
But you might actually get full because fiber is filling, right? You have fiber in your diet, so the things that are super filling are like fiber and, fat, those kind of satisfy that need to feel full. And so you might not get through all 20 cups of your rice and broccoli. So that was one thing that was definitely, kind of oversimplified.
Oversimplified for sure.
So, and then, you actually know my favorite part, which was really disturbing, was the discussion on how you could take drops of vegan blood and put it in a petri dish with prostate cancer cells. What did he say? Like, you got suppression of the prostate cancer cell growth in vitro, which means in a petri dish, which means not in a human, it's in a lab. And so blood with cancer cells.
Yeah, I spend so little time on in vitro studies because there's such nonsense that
we talk about that, and we talk about that in other episodes. Like, if you see something where like a supplement has shown to kill cancer, like this herb has shown to kill cancer in vitro, don't be taking that to your doctor, because your doctor's going to be like, that's not a human study. That doesn't show it's going to be the same,
So that oversimplification of taking vegan blood in a petri dish and saying, oh, the cancer was less viable, because we are steeped in medicine and science, then we know that an in vitro study is not something that justifies any kind of recommendation in our clinical opinion, right? Nor would it with any doctor. But this is the part that kind of makes me squirm in my seat. I also know that's going to land really well on other people's ears who don't have any scientific background. And that manipulation.
Oh, yeah. No, they're going to hear like vegan blood kills cancer. So,
yeah.
I mean,
that's basically it. They gave the visual, very simple visual, that brought home the point that vegan blood leads to cancer not being viable. I mean, they showed it, and they show it in such a way that I feel like the sandwiching between other points that they're making is very calculated.
Yeah, the editing of the whole thing was incredibly, like you said, well calculated. Oh, one thing that I did find of them, like kind of like, I guess, omissions, was they show this close up of the poultry and prostate cancer study. And so they kind of zoom in on the page, and then they blur out the rest of the copy, and they just focus on the one part that talks about how men with high prognostic risk and a high poultry intake had a 4-fold increased risk of recurrence or progression of prostate cancer. And so I went back and rewound it, and I paused it because I had looked for the study that they referred to and realized that they left something out. If you read the conclusion from this article,
from the very article that they put up on the screen.
Yeah, I did a screenshot.
Yeah.
It says, our results suggest that the post-diagnostic consumption, so after you've been diagnosed with prostate cancer, eating processed or unprocessed red meat, fish, or skinless poultry is not associated with prostate cancer recurrence or progression. But they did say, whereas consumption of eggs and poultry with skin would be the issue. I mean, so
yes,
that's huge. And they have it up on the screen. And if you blink, you miss it.
Of course, yes. So they highlight what they want you to take out of that, and they oversimplified it. So that's not surprising. And this makes me squirm in my seat, because I know that they're doing a selective messaging, because it's very clear in the literature that the fatty acid choline encourages prostate cancers to grow. And choline from chicken skins and from eggs is something that is one thing that I ask my patients with prostate cancer to remove from their diet, because it's kind of adding fuel to the metabolic fire of prostate cancer. So that truism is in there, but of course they oversimplify it.
And that's the part that is frustrating, that they're not actually presenting what that paper was about.
Right. You don't have to remove every type of animal product, but you do need to remove those that are choline rich. So that's different.
So, and then I think when he shows up to 3 organizations, he calls these organizations, tries to find out why on their website they are promoting these certain foods when they've been shown to be cancer causing. And he's talking to like the cancer information specialist, at the American Cancer Society or at Komen, or at, he talks to like the customer service person at the American Diabetes Association. And so when they honestly say, I don't know, they don't know, because they're the ones who are supposed to like direct you to, oh, here's a program for exercise for diabetes, or this is a way you can get a ride to your cancer center. So they don't know what's on the website or why it's on the website. And they're not the decision makers. And so he's like, this is a conspiracy. Well, no, it's not. You're talking to the wrong people.
Right. And the one person he did talk to that was an authority, the scientific officer, he did talk to him, but he was using, there's a few things he did. I mean, it was clearly gotcha journalism.
Right. And
the gentleman at the top knows that he's on the receiving end with a camera and an interview who's trying to do a gotcha interview. There's no good way to handle that except to walk out. So,
right.
Making him look highly suspect because he wouldn't answer the diet connection. That was the only scene where he talked to somebody with some authority, and it was, it's legit. The guy was kind of between a rock and a hard place on making medical claims on behalf of the American Diabetes Association, because the American Diabetes Association really doesn't take a strong stand on diet. I'm not saying that's right. I think that that's kind of shady and involved with a lot of money, but I felt for the poor guy getting interviewed personally.
Oh, totally. And but he saw right through it, which
meant he had to get up and leave, which made him, which made for good footage.
Another, notice I'm the one who's really picking this movie apart. It really bothered me. When the movie first starts, they talk about how like meat and saturated fat, those are group 1 carcinogens.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And, they compare it to cigarette smoking. That's when you have the scene with the mom is like frying up cigarettes in a pan and serving her children.
Mm-hmm.
Again, that's like evoking some sort of emotion, like a visceral response. And, he compares it to cigarettes and plutonium, that those also are group 1 carcinogens. And then he never tells you what a group 1 carcinogen is.
But you're going to tell us right now, aren't you?
Well, once I find it in my notes, I am, because I had to write it down. I think I memorized this stuff. Okay, so the International Agency for Research on Cancer and the U.S. National Toxicology Program have come up with lists of things that have been shown at different levels to potentially be, cancer causing.
Okay.
So a group 1 carcinogen has been shown to be carcinogenic, cancer causing to humans.
Okay.
It's not dose specific. So it's not exposure specific. So it's not like eating one piece of bacon is equivalent to an exposure to plutonium.
Right. Yeah. So I see what you're saying. So what's lacking in that list is dose.
Right. And then those organizations have actually said that this is not to be used as medical advice.
Mm-hmm.
So this is information. So there are different groups. And so like the next group would be group 2A is the next group that would say, these are probably carcinogenic, and then it kind of goes from there, like to be less and less carcinogenic. But yeah, that first group, it's not like I said, it's dose dependent. It's not like just because you have an egg, they're making the equivalent of an egg to a cigarette.
The group 1 carcinogen that is listed is specifically processed meats, not meat.
Right. Processed meat. Right. Processed meat and not eggs, even though he does later say something like 1 egg is equivalent to smoking 5 cigarettes a day, or whatever.
So this is where the extrapolation gets out of hand, right? Like, 1, eggs are never mentioned as anything to do with carcinogens.
No.
So this is where the visuals and the extrapolation gets out of hand, because it's specifically processed meat with nitrogen compounds that are known to cause cancer.
Right.
Yeah, and so there's no the extrapolation of like saying a hot dog is the equivalent of an egg is part of the problem.
And that an egg is equivalent to a cigarette.
And an egg is equivalent to a cigarette. And somehow this all just gets talked about as if in your mind you're supposed to associate them all as equivalents.
Right.
And I took issue with the fact that processed meat, he listed some things that are simply canned, like canned tuna, canned salmon. I don't think that qualifies as being a processed meat product.
Because if you read the ingredients, it's often tuna and, water or maybe oil. And sometimes it's soybean oil and sometimes it's olive oil. But yes. Yeah.
And now I will admit some cans have BPA in their lining, and that's a bad thing, and that is carcinogenic. But most tuna cans don't. And so this goes into the whole, both oversimplification and extrapolation to say processed food, and then they point at it and say, on the American Cancer Society or one of their websites, they put canned tuna and canned salmon as something they recommended.
Yeah. So, and then they're talking to basically a receptionist.
So this is when there's no real interest in truth in this show. This is like, okay, we're just going to slam you with select factoids that prove our point, which is ultimately to eat vegan.
Right. And so speaking of truth or lack thereof, is that they don't give the complete picture of the risk factors for diabetes.
Oh, I know. Bothersome.
According to them, it's saturated fat.
Oh, yeah. They don't just say it's saturated fat. They say we're completely misled if we think it's sugar.
Right.
Well, that's ridiculous. No, we're not. Of course it's sugar. Okay, I'm going to go to a biochemical truism. It's a truism that when you take a cell, any cells, and you slam them over and over and over with something, like let's just say you eat a lot of sugar in your diet, and you're constantly have this high glucose, your pancreas and your cells are having to respond to insulin and let the sugar in, they're going to stop letting the sugar in. And that is where the insulin resistance comes in. The glucose no longer is able to go into the cells because at some point the cells have to protect themselves. But that's true for any receptor that's being expressed in a cell membrane. If you go knocking on that cell, telling it to do the same thing over and over, in excess, the cell will respond by saying, did I have 1,000 doors to let that glucose in? I'm going to have to lower that down to 200 because you're overwhelming me. And this is a biochemical truism of receptors on cells in general, where it will self-regulate according to its environment outside. So I'm saying this because, of course, too much sugar causes diabetes. This is to say otherwise is ludicrous.
Yeah, no, that whole presentation. Yeah. So do we take another break? Let's take another break and we'll come back and compose ourselves.
Oh yeah. I gotta calm down.
All right.
All right.
We'll be back. All right, Tina. So in conclusion, so we've been talking about What the Health, which is a docudrama that we watched on Netflix.
Mm-hmm.
And I got to say, overall, like, I do not like this movie. I think it has valid points.
Mm-hmm. Mixed in with
basically propaganda.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like they use some really base tactics to drive their message home that was completely not necessary. I mean, again, whenever it's fine to tug on the heartstrings. I know the music has to be set and the visuals have to be appropriate, but that's not what they did. It was like it was more crass than that in my mind. It made you make you grossed out or angry enough to completely stop thinking and just be led by the nose.
Oh, it made me angry.
Mm-hmm. That's what
not for the reasons they wanted me to be angry, though. It made me angry at them because of what we just talked about.
Yeah.
So
can I say this?
Yeah.
Eat a lot of plants.
Eat a lot of plants.
Okay, so the one thing that I want to say that, and you started with this, your patients come to you and they're like, "Oh, I changed the way I'm eating." Okay, so I'm not into the means that they got there because I don't think this is something I would ever recommend people to watch. But the net effect was good. They got out and ate more vegetables.
Exactly. And that was when I watched it, and I don't remember my response the next time I saw this one patient who was like, "Oh, did you watch it?" And I was like, "I did." And I probably spun it and was like, "I'm so glad that you are eating more vegetable." I probably said something like that because I wasn't going to be like, "That movie was full of that got bleeped."
We're going to have to bleep you.
Yeah. So because in honor of the bowl of broccoli, let's do a broccoli rating scale.
I love this. So 5 broccoli is a high recommendation?
High recommendation.
Okay. How many broccoli did you give it?
I'm giving it,
Can we cut the broccoli in half?
Yeah, I know. I so want to give it an empty bowl of broccoli.
Oh.
But it did have some points that I think people would benefit being aware of, such as like the agricultural and government influence. So yeah, I'm going to give it a half a piece of broccoli.
All right. I think I'm with you on that. I mean, I don't know. If I was feeling generous, I might give it 1, but the more I think about it and the more those images come up in my mind when I don't want to be thinking about it, the angrier I get at them for putting them there in my head.
Yeah, I was going to go with 1, and then you said that you could do a half, and so I'm cutting that piece in half.
You're like, as little as I can give them.
Yeah, just
can
like
I brown Can I make it brown and floppy, or yellow the broccoli?
I'm giving it 1 overcooked, boiled, and then roasted.
Oh God, sounds disgusting.
No. Yeah, I mean, like roasted to where it's blackened. Like I'm not really happy with that broccoli in any way. Yeah. There's no nutritional value.
A completely unedible piece of broccoli.
All right.
Okay.
So we're going to continue with this for the rest of the pod. We've got a couple more movies coming. Our next movie, which I think it'd be really fun if people watch it in preparation for our review. I
totally agree. Yes. Are we going to announce it?
Yeah, of course, we're going to announce it.
In Defense of Food.
In Defense of Food.
In Defense of Food.
So it's based on a book by Michael Pollan, who is a writer. He's an author, New York Times bestselling author. So, that's going to be our next movie. It is available I watched it through, because I have a library card. And so there's an app called Canopy, starting with a K, Kanopy.
Oh, is that what that was? I saw that and I didn't know what it was.
Yeah. So Canopy is a way that you can rent movies with using your library card. I think it's also on Amazon Prime, but you watched it
on Apple TV. I rented it for $2.99.
You rented it. Yeah. So you can rent it on Amazon Prime as well, or Amazon Video.
And Michael Pollan, I think we're saying his name right.
I think so.
In any case, he wrote a lot of the New York Times bestsellers that people might be aware of, like Omnivore's Dilemma, The Botany of Desire, and of course the book by the same name, In Defense of Food.
Which I have not read. I haven't read any of his books.
Excellent writer. Omnivore's Dilemma got a little long for me because I was like, okay, got it. But other than that, other than, kind of, hammering home the message a little longer than I'd like, he's a great storyteller and a great writer. Okay. And anyways, yeah.
Yeah. So we're gonna keep this going in the new year.
Yeah, so join us. Pre-watch it, and then when we talk about it, you'll get involved. Maybe we could do one of these live someday. Wouldn't that be cool?
That would be cool. But you know what? But definitely leave comments on our Instagram. Like, let us know. Send us messages. Let us know if you do watch this movie. Let us know what you think.
Or if you have questions, like, is that even true? What was in the movie? And then we can talk about it.
Because we didn't bring up every issue that we had with the movie.
It would have been too long.
Right. And I just want to put it out there. We are not anti-vegan.
Yeah, definitely not anti-vegan. You can be a responsible and perfectly healthy vegan. And if that's your jam, then go with it.
Yeah. So on that note, I'm Dr. Leah Sherman.
And I'm Dr. Tina Kaiser.
And this is the Cancer Pod.
Until next time.